The thing that I thought was really kind of the most chilling when I first heard this story, the bullet casings had words kind of etched into them. Delay, deny, depose were the three words carved into the three bullet casings that, killed this man. There are certain conditions that if you get diagnosed with them, health insurance companies just say, sorry, we don't help with that. It can cost tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to care for your loved one. And the insurance company just says, sorry, that's not what we do. I think that is clearly the point that he's trying to make, is that health insurance companies are also costing lives in the decisions that they make.
This was not an act of, rampage, of
Oh,
anger.
no.
This was premeditated. This was thought
Mhm.
through. This was to send a message.
There are some people that are calling this guy a hero.
80% condemn the murder, but empathize with his motives. 80%.
I
That's
was watching,
huge.
I think it's also a little messed up that a lot of people are they're almost turning this into, he's becoming this hero. I remember watching Saturday Night Live a couple weeks ago, and they were doing something, and again, it's a comedy show, but everybody in the audience started hooping and hollering about this guy, and the comic was just shocked. Right, here's this guy who lives in New York. The murder happened in New York, and he's talking about what's going on, and everybody else is celebrating. Like, the audience members are celebrating, and he's like, this is a murderer, right? Like, this guy's accused of murder. Why are we celebrating this? He just didn't know how to respond to an audience that was pro murder and anti capitalism.
This is one individual frustrated with the system, but how many people feel, maybe not to a murderous intent, but how many people feel just as frustrated with their job, or think work sucks, or they're being taken advantage of, or they're not getting the pay they deserve at the expense of profits?
There are a lot of organizations that have sacrificed purpose and people to hit numbers. And I don't think that that's a good thing. I think that that's one of the problems that capitalism has to figure out a way to address, or it's going to get worse.
Welcome to the Make Work Not Suck podcast.
All right, Daniel. Assassination of a CEO, the death of Brian Thompson, and the fallout of healthcare and work. Let's talk about how the murder of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, from both perspectives. How's that impacting healthcare? How's that impacting business? How's that impacting work? Some people are even hailing this guy as a hero that murdered somebody. This is a weird situation. And I think what's even more interesting is this guy's even been labeled as a terrorist in this situation, which, again, I'm not diminishing the bad thing the guy did, but what makes him a terrorist?
I think this could be peak work sucks, right? When people are being murdered over work, we've clearly got a problem. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'm excited to get into it.
Well, it says here, an Ivy League graduate turned assassin, a CEO helmed of one of America's largest controversial industries, and a chilling manifesto. So when you put all this together, you get one messed up situation. Let's talk about what happened. December 4th, 21 days before Christmas, Brian Thompson, CEO of UnitedHealthcare, walking towards an investor conference at that, is basically gunned down on the side of the street.
Yeah. I've actually stayed at that Hilton. It's a nice place. It's not crazy nice. I wouldn't afford it, but it's it's kind of scary because I've been there. I know where this guy was gunned down. And I think one of the interesting things here is that the person who has been accused of murdering him, I mean, I'm assuming he's guilty, but let's give him his due process. The person charged with the murder is not some person who you would typically think of as, hasn't, found their place in society, has been rejected, hasn't really found the place where they fit or connect. I think the guy was the valedictorian of his high school. He went to an Ivy League school. The guy's very successful in many ways, and it just kind of doesn't fit the narrative of a social misfit murdering someone. It's like, no, this guy was an up and comer. Why would he be the one? Not that it's ever okay, but I think it's a different twist on the story that we've heard maybe some iterations of in the past. It's a different twist when it's coming from a guy who seemingly had so many things going for him.
What I think it's interesting is the book tipping point.
Mm-hmm.
When it finally gets to a point that something triggers, and like you said, this up and comer Ivy League graduate, very smart, intelligent, finally hit a point of, we'll call it vigilante justice,
Hmm.
taking matters in his own hands to try to change the healthcare system and what he believes. And he's got a manifesto on this
Yeah,
that says it's corrupt and is not for the people, does not provide care, and this is his way of trying to press a tipping point. And it has caused a lot of controversial conversations. There's a lot of talk about healthcare reform yet again, but not from a healthcare standpoint, but from a corporate healthcare standpoint.
right. The
Um,
thing that I thought was really kind of the most chilling when I first heard this story was the fact that the casings of the bullet casings had words kind of etched into them. Delay, deny, depose were the three words um, carved into the three bullet casings that killed this man. Apparently, kind of a critique of the healthcare's practice of delaying claims, denying coverage, or deposing patients in needs, and just saying we don't cover that anymore, which is hard because I've got several people in my family with chronic health issues, and this is something we've had to wrestle with. There are certain conditions that if you get diagnosed with them, health insurance companies just say, sorry, we don't help with that. And it can cost, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to care for your loved one. And the insurance company just says, sorry, that's not what we do. So I get the frustration. Murdering somebody's not okay. But I think that is clearly the point that he's trying to make, is that health insurance companies are also costing lives in the decisions that they make. And that one's tough because they are kind of in the business of health insurance, right? It exists to cover catastrophic events, but they are a business. They need to make a profit, and finding the balance between that is a tough situation for anybody to be in.
Well, it goes into, at the end of the day, it's United Healthcare is a for-profit business. It's publicly traded. It's got shareholders it has to account for. And I think
Right.
that's where a lot of this goes down to is, I think a lot of people will claim out the issues with capitalism.
Right.
This is a product of having a capitalistic society, and it's not, it's a byproduct of the system that we allowed. But to your point, I mean, if someone literally had those words, delay, deny, and depose, etched on the casing of the bullets, this was not an act of, rampage of
Oh
anger.
no.
This was, premeditated. This was thought
Hmm.
through. This was to send a message to really drive a point. And I don't know. I struggle with this because murder's wrong. Like
Right.
I feel like the means of doing this, there's got to be a better way. But an individual this intelligent, what else did they try? Did they try many other things? Did they, is it one voice was not enough to drive change? Is the machine too big that he needed to make this dramatic of a statement? And then the other side of it, where he's being hailed a hero in some cases of sticking it to the man and to the corporate machine. At the end of the day, that was a human being on the other side of those bullets.
Right. And that
So,
human being has a family, and it's really sad to me to see how many people are celebrating what he did and holding him up as a hero for fighting against the corporate machine. I think that this is really maybe peeling back some layers and getting to the heart of what I think makes work suck for a lot of people. I think that there are many people, I think especially younger generations, who have seen profits come at the expense of people and have this almost visceral rejection of that. Like, that's not okay, that some people have way more than they could ever spend in a lifetime, and some people don't have enough. I saw this meme yesterday, and it said, homeless man sees a shooting star and wishes for his next meal, only to realize that the shooting star was a billionaire going to the moon for fun. And it's like, that's kind of that. I get it. Like, I get why so many people are so angry when there are people who have, hundreds of billions of dollars, and then there are other people who struggle to have enough, it's like food or rent, but you can't have both this month. I think that that's been that trend has been accelerating. That's getting worse. It's not getting better. And I think people who have been impacted by that are, in some senses, rightfully upset about the system. Not that that excuses murder. Murder's not going to fix that, but I understand their frustrations. So what do we do about it?
It argued that healthcare systems prioritize profit over patient care, and it needed to be held accountable. So I think we got a picture here. Now let's see what the public is saying about this. So you cut a level of social media that is got him painted both as the hero and the villain.
Right.
They're criticizing that the healthcare system was what turned him into this vigilante.
Right.
And then you've got a lot of go
that
ahead.
he's the victim. He's not. It's not his fault. He's the victim.
He's the victim.
Right.
And it's exposing a large, 49 million people insured by one healthcare company. And I'm sure he's not the only person in that 49 million. And that's not even, this is only one insurance company. This is not all of them.
Right.
I'm sure there's, probably about 48 million people, if not 49 million people, that probably share a similar sentiment or frustration overall.
Yeah, I've flipped through a little bit of Reddit and some of the comments about him. I mean, there are some people that are calling this guy a hero. Some people that are saying
80%, a particular poll, 80% condemn the murder but empathize with his motives. 80%.
I was watching.
Huge.
It's huge, and I think that would probably skew younger. I think the younger generation, the millennials and Gen Zs, are probably the most sympathetic because they have experienced the downsides of capitalism. And let's be honest, there are downsides to it. I think it's also a little messed up that a lot of people are calling. They're almost turning this into, he's becoming this hero. I remember watching Saturday Night Live a couple of weeks ago, and they were doing something. And again, it's a comedy show, but everybody in the audience started like hooping and hollering about this guy, and the comic was just shocked. Right, here's this guy who lives in New York. The murder happened in New York, and he's talking about what's going on, and everybody else is celebrating. Like the audience members are celebrating, and he's like, "This is a murderer." Right? Like this guy's accused of murder. Why are we celebrating this? And it just shook him. And you could watch it happen live on TV. He just didn't know how to respond to an audience that was pro murder and anti capitalism.
Yep. This is such a messed up scenario. How does this relate to making work not suck? I mean, I think one key thing is it highlights the disconnect between people, how people feel from the systems they rely on.
Yeah.
Workplace as a business as a whole is no different. When frustrations boil over, it doesn't make work suck. It makes work dangerous.
Right.
And think about, this is one individual frustrated with the system, but how many people feel, maybe not to a murderous intent, but how many people feel just as frustrated with their job or think work sucks or they're being taken advantage of or they're not getting the pay they deserve at the expense of profits?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen this. I've even experienced this, right? Where they have layoffs and people lose their job so that the people at the top can get their bonuses. And I think that there's, look, we're not going to fix a problem unless we're honest about it being a problem. You're not going to fix anything that you don't think is broken. And so I think that there are absolutely ways in which capitalism values profits over people and profits over purpose. And there are a lot of organizations that have sacrificed purpose and people to hit numbers. And I don't think that that's a good thing. I think that that's one of the problems that capitalism has to figure out a way to address, or it's going to get worse. And people are going to feel more and more disenfranchised and that the system does not work for them. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people who feel the system's rigged. Like it's a game you can't win. When you look at the price of housing, when you look at the just student loan debt and what it would be like to try to start life right now as a 20 something, it's like trying to climb a ladder, but the first rung on the ladder is 12 feet up. It's like, good luck. Climb that ladder. And it's like, well, how do you even get to the first ring? It's 12 feet up. How am I going to get there?
Well, and your KPI of getting to that 12th rung is not hitting the mark, so we're going to fire you.
Right. It's like, if you can't reach up and touch that, we're going to have to let you go. It's like, who in the world could jump up and grab the first rung of the ladder at 12 feet high?
Oh well, and I'm not 6'9". I'm only 5'4".
Right.
Maybe at 6'9" with an arm reach with a little bit of a jump, maybe. But
Right, maybe. I think that this, though, represents the underlying feeling, and I think it's growing. I think it was just Gen Zs and millennials bitching, but now I'm seeing older and older people feeling like the system is rigged against them, and feeling like getting up, going to school, getting a good job, and working hard 40 hours a week for 40 years is not sufficient. Like, you can't survive doing that. If you want to live in a major city in the US, that's not good enough. I think there's a lot of people who are rightfully angry about that. Now, the solution's tricky. We get to that in a second. But I think there's a legitimate complaint that going to school, getting a decent job, and working hard 40 hours a week is not going to be enough to provide for you and your spouse and 2.5 kids.
yeah, let's just take it inside the nuance inside a normal business. I think this happens. This happens every day, and this is almost I wouldn't say more dangerous, because I do think most people are there's probably a majority percentage that are okay, or is their life where they want it to be? Is their pay where it needs to be? Are they struggling to pay the mortgage? Are they struggling to put food on the table? No, but they're not able to go on the family vacation as often as they'd like. Right now,
Right.
there's a good chunk of people in that category, and then there's a good chunk of people that are living paycheck to paycheck, and then there's the people that really are paycheck to paycheck is not enough money.
Yep.
But I think when you look inside a general organization, when people feel the system is rigged against them, they'll idolize those who challenge it. Think
Yep.
inside companies where there's someone that's fed up. This is that one individual that's fed up, and they start becoming the vigilante inside the organization. Now they're not waving a gun around or they're threatening to kill the executive, but they start building that toxic culture, and basically it starts to build that outrage and retaliation, and the system starts to crumble. I actually think that is a huge factor of what makes work suck. And I'm not criticizing the person that's challenging it or being being idolized for their retaliation against it. I think that's a tipping point scenario where enough is enough. But
Hmm.
I don't think companies are doing enough to, like, if that's what happens in your organization, or you're following one of those individuals and it's literally happening right now, it's because something is not triggering a string of information for people to understand reality, and that tipping point is too late. It's reactive.
Yes.
So now either the company has their head in the sand, or they're greedy and they're sucking profits out, or
Hmm.
they just don't know. And I
Yeah.
think
Or
I
maybe
think
some
it,
combination thereof.
some combination of all the above. But regardless, it's a very dangerous situation in general. And I think we're seeing that so much. I think we're seeing that with the Great Resignation. That
Yep.
people are just fed up with their jobs. I think the return to work stuff we talked about,
Yeah.
refusing to return to work. I think we're just seeing all of this all over the place. And I don't think this healthcare, I mean, this was challenging the healthcare system. But I
Hmm.
mean, even looking at, United, when the attack happened, their stock dropped $63 billion in value. Of
Wow.
course, it's tarnished their reputation and all this stuff. But okay, fine. The company lost value, and they're trying to figure out what to do. But here's where this went too far the wrong way. A lot of these healthcare companies are now removing photos of their executives and their leadership teams from websites. They're moving
Hmm.
investment meetings online. So because I'm going to guess, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to guess that Mr. Thompson was strategically gunned down in front of an investor meeting. I think that was very strategic, because that meeting
Yeah.
was to
I don't
talk
think
about the profits, and
that wasn't an
yeah,
accident.
that was sending a message. And
Yeah.
so, now you've got individuals that, don't want to go to these meetings because, they could be the next target. And then you've got, installing weapon detections technology in offices. Like
Yeah.
this is going the wrong direction.
More and more companies are spending more and more on security to keep their executives safe, especially publicly traded companies who are reporting record profits. And it's really easy to look at the people at the top of the org chart and say it's your fault that you're generating billions and billions of dollars of profit, but you're not really serving your customers or taking care of your employees well. And so I think that's an interesting question: is to what extent is the CEO and the executive team accountable for how their organization behaves in the world and in the market? They're clearly
Ooh, that's
accountable
a
for the
good one.
profits, but are they also accountable for the purpose?
I would agree, and I think here's an interesting one, and I'm not trying to belittle or belay any of this. Technically, the CEO here that was murdered, his boss was the board of directors, and he
Right?
was charged with doing a thing with the business. And now he was handsomely paid for it. He took the job.
Hmm.
He didn't have to take it, so it was all by choice. I agree with
Sure.
all that. But really, isn't the board the one responsible for deciding that's the directive the CEO needs to go?
Generally, I mean, they will structure his compensation to get the results out of the business they want. So whether that's long-term stock appreciation, earnings per share, his compensation is set by the board. He will be paid well if he does what they are asking him to do.
Well, that's where I go down to, can't a board put some initiatives in there to say these are, again, profit's not a bad thing. It's
No.
when profit turns into greed at the expense of all the other things. I believe there are things that healthcare companies can do to still better serve their people
Mhm.
and get profits. And I think I'll go on a little mini rant here. I think part of the problem too is on the opposite side of it. I think the doctors are getting screwed just as much as the patients are,
Yeah,
because they're jacking up the premiums and they're lowering the payouts.
right,
It's got to bring balance across the board. I mean, it's getting to the point that doctors don't even want to deal with it. Or I
right.
mean, I've even talked to doctors that are like, I'm done practicing because it's too much of a hassle. And you got good doctors coming out of the system.
Yeah. You know, when you and I worked together at a company a couple of years ago, I loved the way that you talked about the job of the CEO. It stands for three things. Why don't you unpack that? Because I think that's a helpful reframing of the job of the CEO.
All right. So the job of the CEO, it's not chief executive officer. It's customer, employee, and owners and shareholders. So we'll say owners, because if you're a shareholder, you're an owner in some sorts. But it's not only that, it's the customer's customer, it's the employee and the employee's family, and it's
Mm,
the owners and the owner's legacy. And if you put the CEO in the middle of that and you draw those three dots in a triangle and those outer ones, it makes a target.
mm,
And the problem is too often the CEO will go strictly after the customer to bring the revenue in and pay the shareholders at the expense of the people. Now, there are
mhm.
companies that go the other way. They take the money from the customers and give it to the employees at the expense of the customer. But at the end of the day, if you are if a CEO can truly bring balance into delivering value to the customer, providing for the employee and their families and the shareholders, that's a triple win. I mean, I hate the whole win-win concept. I think it's dumb when people use that as like a greed excuse, but you really can get to a win-win-win-win-win-win situation when you look at it holistically like that. And I think that's what CEOs need to do. I think boards need to be part of that equation as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I
I
think
think
boards need to set that as the expectation and structure the comp of their executives to deliver that triple win, because most of certainly publicly traded CEOs or CEOs of publicly traded companies, they're really just compensated on earnings per share and driving up the stock price and making the owners happy. And to do that, they've got to make the customers and employees happy enough, but they can't piss them off. But they're not really, very few of them are incentivized to engage their customers and employees and owners and make and delight all three of them, because it's hard. That's really hard.
especially in publicly traded companies. The average tenure is what, 3 or 4 years? And what
Hmm.
do? The first thing they do is they go in and they wipe out a bunch of people, and
Hmm.
that drives the share value up because profits skyrocket. But then there's too much work and stuff starts slipping through the cracks. So after you kind of get the boost in stock price, you get all the people back. And at the end of the day, then the next guy comes in and he's got a mess to clean up. And we just have compounding messes where the CEO and the board needs to put a sustainable plan together that
Hmm.
doesn't include hiring people to or firing people to drive the stock price, rehiring a chunk of that back. Like, I'm all for good hiring and firing techniques for keeping good people in the company and rewarding them, and underperformers out the door. I'm all for systems like that, but when it's just mass layoffs to drive a stock price so you can hit a stock per share or a dollar per share and get a
Hmm.
bonus. I think boards should penalize against that.
Yeah. But it's hard though because CEOs are usually viewed as kind of the representative of the company, right? We know who the
Mhm.
CEOs are. Off the top of my head, I don't know who many board members of publicly traded companies. I know that information is publicly available. You could go look for it. But if I asked you about Tesla, you would tell me that Elon Musk is the CEO, but I don't know who's on his board, right?
Right.
So it's easy to associate a single name and a single face with an organization and say he represents their values, good or bad, and the decisions that that company makes, good or bad. And whether or not that's fair, it is true. That is what people are going to think. And so it makes that CEO job really, really tough because even things that are not your decision, you're still going to get blamed for.
Yep. Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's why the CEO has the target on the head. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, the owners and equity holders, shareholders, etc., those usually carry the most demand. Actually, it's
Right.
usually the customer and the shareholders, but I think in this healthcare case, it's the shareholders.
Well,
And
sure,
and I
because they're
don't
the only ones who can get you fired,
right.
right? Like if your customers leave, you lose revenue. If your employees leave, you've got a turnover problem. If your owners are unhappy, you get fired. And so
Right.
from a self-preservation standpoint, the CEO's first job is going to be keep the owners happy, keep the board happy.
Well, and I think that goes into the healthcare system as a whole.
Right.
It is the customer, I think in the situation, the assailant in this case, he was the customer of the healthcare company and he was being screwed over.
Hmm.
And I'm willing to bet the employees of the same organization. I'm pretty sure if I go back a couple of podcasts, and we're talking about the worst places to work. I'm pretty sure United was pretty high up on the
was one
list.
was one of them.
The change starts at the top, and I think the change starts with what the board's expectations are set on the CEO.
Hmm. Yep.
And I think it's easy for us to say the CEO just needs to.
Right.
I don't think that's I think that's a third of the equation.
Yeah, for those of you who think that my kid's like this, my son is like, I can't wait to be the boss. And I'm like, okay, but the boss has a boss. And he's like, what? The CEO has a boss, right? And if you think that getting to the corner office and being the CEO means you don't have a boss, you will be very disappointed because every CEO has a boss. So it's much more complicated than just saying, well, the CEO needs to have some balls and stand up to the shareholders. It is not that simple
Yeah,
because
I would say this: you do that to your boss and see what happens.
right,
I dare anybody that thinks a CEO can do that, do it to
right,
your boss and tell me what happens because I
yeah,
guarantee you it's going to be about the same reaction.
hmm it is
Now,
it is a lot harder than you think it is.
right? It's yeah,
But that doesn't entirely excuse them at the same
no,
point, right? They still are accountable for their decisions and for the situations they choose to put themselves in. And I think this would be maybe my one wish or call to action is I think both boards and CEOs need to work harder at clarifying the purpose of their organization beyond profits and put a metric around it. I get that's not easy, but you guys are being paid hundreds of millions of dollars. You're incredibly smart people. Figure it out and find a way to put a metric on your purpose as well as the metric on your profits. Because we know earnings per share, we know stock price, those things are easy to measure. What's your purpose? What's the reason that your organization exists in the first place? And put a metric on that so that we can see, and you can see, and the whole organization can see that we care about more than just the money.
agree. Now let's take this to the average employee working at one of these big companies. How do you get excited or how do you feel good about your job when the world is literally angry at the company you work for?
Oh,
Industries like healthcare, energy, finance, they're increasingly facing public backlash for corporate decisions they can't control. And so, who gets the brunt of all this backlash? It's the people that work in these companies.
right.
How dare you work there? You should quit. You should go work somewhere else. can't believe you work at a company like that. Like, how does that make people feel that work for United? And that's just the job they have. I'm willing to bet most of them, just like most people that work at any job that they don't like, or they're doing it for a paycheck, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, it's to make ends meet.
Right. I worked for a financial services technology company during the 2008 financial crisis, when all these banks were going out of business. Those were a lot of my clients. And I had people being like, how in the world are you working for all these banks and helping them? The banks are evil. And man, I was just trying to pay my bills. I wasn't an executive. I didn't have a leadership role that, had it made any difference. But it's hard. It's hard when people are looking at your industry and pointing fingers and accusing your industry of things, and some of them are true, but not all of them. And it's not fair because I can't change a multi-billion-dollar organization from my little tiny seat. I think that for the average person who is working in a large company, whether they're getting, ripped on social media or not, I think it's incumbent on each of us to be the difference that we want to see, to try to change what we can change within our sphere of influence, to make this a better situation for our customers and for our employees and for our owners as well. I think that the focus on profits only is a short-term strategy that causes long-term problems. We need to be more purpose-driven. Most organizations need to be more purpose-driven because that's a more sustainable strategy long-term. And if you've got any sort of influence in your organization, pushing and nudging your leadership in that direction is going to be, I think, the best thing you can do for an organization that's getting a little bit of resistance from the public.
I don't think it even has to be purpose driven. Now, I agree. I love purpose driven companies and I advocate for purpose driven companies. I don't think this is like every company needs to have a philanthropic mission and change the world objective. You just need balance in the equation. Your mission can still be make profit, but it's got to be at the balance of the customers and the employees. And when you find that balance, you can actually have a healthy, thriving company. I mean, Chick-fil-A, for example, right? True at Kathy. No margin, no mission.
No margin, no mission. Right.
But still a very healthy company, very profitable company, very impactful company. And it's not just because they're a Christian-based organization. It's the intentionality.
I would say every organization needs a purpose beyond profits, because the problem with making profits your purpose is you will chase anything that'll make money.
I agree to an extent, and this is where I'm saying this is that's the end goal. I think there's companies that have an in between. There's a friend of mine that runs a $300 million pest control company that's kind of across the southern United States.
Okay.
They don't have a mission. You know what their mission really is? Now they've got a phenomenal culture.
Okay.
They don't have a purpose and this number they track on the wall. They have a very high empathy for their employees. They take care of their people. They take care of their customers. And their only metric of success, besides customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, is did they beat last year's revenue numbers? Their entire goal is to beat themselves. They don't care, and they're owned by a much larger conglomerate.
Okay.
They're always the top performing and providing profits to the parent company.
Okay.
But they have the highest growth. They have the highest customer satisfaction. They have the highest employee satisfaction. But their mission literally is to be 13% better growth, if you will, on top line, bottom line. But it's not to be the world's cleanest health pest control company. It's not to be, there's no purpose like that. But there's intentionality between the balance between the three. They service their customer, they service their employees, and they service their shareholders. And so I think it's just, if you start with that. Now, I do agree. Now, they're a $300 million company. They've done pretty good over the past number of years to get there. I think that they could grow faster if they instilled a purpose. I think it would be an accelerator, but I don't think it's a requirement. I think the absolute fundamental is you've got to bring balance to those 3 points of the equation. If you do that, you're at least in a category above everybody else. Then if you want to 10x from there, you get purpose driven.
So what about health insurance companies? That's what we're talking about here, right? The CEO of a health company. Health insurance.
So
Should they have a purpose beyond profit?
again, I think they now you're gonna put me in a circle here. Again,
Because
I agree to an extent, but I think just bring balance to the damn equation first. Like just dive into the employee and the
yeah,
don't incentivize, like from the board level, value customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction along with the profit returns. That
right,
alone is a step in the right direction. That'll make work not suck for how many thousands of people that work for the organization and the 49 million people that are insured by that organization.
right.
I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I just got back from a quarterly board meeting for a healthcare company in California. Now
Okay,
they're a provider
okay.
and they're in California. So
Yikes.
there's all the regulations and the fees and the taxes and guess
And
what?
at the time we're recording, every all of Los Angeles is on fire right now, so that's not a good
Right.
situation.
Right. So they have a very strong culture and they have a very strong passion for the customer. They
Good.
provide hospice services, so the patients are literally dying that they
Ooh,
serve,
yeah.
and they do have a mission. Now they don't have a metric that they track. No, it's in the process. We're getting there.
Hmm.
But when I walked in the door with them a year ago, they were already balanced in that three equation. So they're trying to push further, but they didn't know that they were balanced there. It was kind of accidental. Over the
Okay.
course of the year, we got really intentional between the three prospects or the three categories. And they've made a lot of changes. The business is in a better direction and they've gone through some technology swaps and restructuring of the company and all this, that, and the other, but their people are happy. They've worked very hard in the last year to get what they needed. Their growth is not where they need it to be. But last
Okay.
year, 2024, was very, like, the customer was no question. Like, these people are dying. We have to take care of them.
Right.
The employees were very important in all these moves and shifts to do, and profits suffered. Now, the
Hmm.
company was still a level of profitable, but coming into this year, the goal is to bring balance back in the equation. We have to raise the profits up, but it cannot be at the expense of the other two.
Right.
So it can be done. There's not an intrinsic driver behind them yet, though they want one, but it's
Okay.
bringing balance to that equation is the first and foremost.
I like that. I think I'm coming around. I'm a big fan of corporate purpose, but you're right. You really do. Every organization has three, call them stakeholders, right? The customers, the employees, and the owners. And just like a three-legged stool, you can't give all your love to one of those and neglect the other two. I don't think you can even give all your attention to two and ignore the third. I think you've got to take care of all three of them if you're going to be successful in the long run, right? Short periods of time, sure, you can cheat a couple of them. But in the long run, I think you've got to take good care of all three of them, or the stool's not going to stand.
There's a company that you and I know of and work with where they prioritize the employee over the customer and the profits. And guess what? They're in a money crunch.
Yeah,
So it can go the other way. And well, we
sure it
worked with a
can.
company during COVID that was very much like that, and they were in a money crunch. So
Yeah, yeah, you can
it,
overvalue employees, and that creates a different problem. You can overvalue customers and do whatever they ask and lose a ton of money because of it. So you've got to balance all three of them. All right, so Ryan, if I could promote you to CEO of a healthcare insurance company, how would you try to find that balance?
ooh, this is gonna sound very simple, but the
Okay.
first thing I would do is I would just dig into the heart of what is causing the why are we having to deny claims? Where are the
Mm,
inefficiencies from an operational standpoint that's creating
hmm.
customer, dissatisfaction? Actually, that'd be second. I would do that first. First and foremost is I'd talk to the people. What's going on? What's needing to happen? I would understand the pulse of the entire organization. I'd get down in the nitty gritties and then turn around and then figure out how to solve that other problem. And then it'll loop
Mm.
back around to profits on the backside.
I would lean into purpose. I would talk about how important our job is in the community, like in society, right? There are people that have catastrophic medical situations. And my father-in-law was just diagnosed with cancer. Health insurance helped pay for the treatment that he could not afford. And he is alive today because of health insurance. They don't get a lot of credit for that, right? They don't get attaboys for the good things that they do. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to kind of reframe health insurance. Sure, it's easy when your claim gets denied to yell and scream and curse, but I think that for the thousands, tens of thousands of people that work in those kinds of companies, remembering that what they do is important and that it
I'm going to
matters.
disagree. I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay,
You know why?
why?
Because if you work in a health insurance company,
Hmm.
you probably know what your product is supposed to do and how it's supposed to serve. Like you don't need to be
Hmm.
told what health insurance benefits are. You need to
Hmm.
be listened to how they can help do more. It's the problem is there is a vision problem. I'm not going to deny that because the vision is
Okay.
talked about results, and so I would definitely that would be on the radar of course correcting. But I think it's
Okay.
first and foremost you have to understand the people. What is it like? In that you will find the wins, and in that you'll find the disconnects. Like
Yeah, but I think you've
Boeing,
got to you've got to tie them back to that bigger purpose, because if they're just there for a paycheck, they're not going to help you
but you
fix
don't
what
need to
needs to
go
be
on a big. You
fixed.
don't need to be on a go on a big vision, purpose tirade, and this is our mission statement, and like that's just fluffy, more corporate BS. They know
I'm a
why they're.
consultant. That's all I do.
I know, me too. But that's my point behind that is if I was to walk into an insurance company right now or ask anybody
Hmm.
what are you trying to achieve with insurance, they would be able to tell you it's already there. It's in the product.
Right.
If you ask them, what are you actually doing? That is where you'll find the disconnect and gap. And so I
Hmm.
don't think it's a matter of getting people excited about a vision or a purpose. I think it's getting people excited about fixing the disconnect, which is a
Mm.
journey problem. So understanding the people, understanding the disconnects in the journey to get to the profits in a healthy manner. That's I don't make it sound that simple, but that's really it.
Yeah.
It's start with the culture to challenge the vision to make the changes to get to the results. And you know what will come out of that? The vision will become clear. People want
Mm.
to see the results of change, not the idea of change. We already know we want change.
Right.
We need to see the results of change to make us believe. If you build
Yeah.
it, he will come, not
Yeah.
if
I
you
think.
talk about it.
Yeah, I think I like what you're saying of engaging the people in the conversation around how do we fix this? Because I think, yeah, I've got to imagine that even the people, I mean, when I worked in financial services, one of the things that I learned, and it broke my heart, is that it's very expensive to be poor. That people who have lots of money pay very little for financial products. People who have no money pay a lot for financial products because they're more risky. uh, Banks don't like to loan to people that don't have money because there's a chance they're not going to get their money back. Whereas people who have tons of money can get money for almost free. And there's a part of that that doesn't feel right, but no one's going to fix that by themselves. You've got to get a whole organization together if you're going to really tackle these big, complicated problems in society.
Agree. You know what the Richard Branson quote? Your people are your company's most valuable asset.
Hmm.
If you don't take care of it and understand how to leverage it, you will never be successful. Truly successful. You'll have waves of
Yeah.
success. You'll have red line compounding red lines, but at
Right.
the end of the day, squeezing the people for profits is what got this gentleman killed, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. It, I don't know. I might edit that and say I don't know if he was squeezing for profits, but the perception was that he was squeezing the company for profits, and somebody killed him for it.
Yeah, like, I'm not trying to blame it on him. I think it's the
No.
situation that happened because
Right.
again, he still answers to a board. So I
Right.
think there's a little of everybody's guilty in the scenario.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that the tragedy highlights the growing disconnect between corporations and public view. It serves as a wake up call for leaders to reevaluate their priorities.
Yeah. I think this is a systemic problem that it's not going to fix overnight. Like there isn't a single thing of, oh, if you just go in and you do this, it'll all be better. I think this is going to be years of hard work from a lot of people working together to try to realign capitalism with humanity.
Yeah, exactly. Well, making work not suck is not just an internal goal. It's about
Right.
creating companies that employees and customers alike can believe in. This is
Yeah,
bigger than just that. And again, this unfortunate tragedy is highlighting the need for this more than ever. And
sure.
now is the time for us to actually make change before something like this happens again.
Yeah, because I'm worried that this is going to become more common as work sucks more and more. People work harder, get paid less, and have less available income to meet their needs and take care of their family. There's going to be a lot of anger. I read a quote several years ago, and it was, I can't remember if it was at Davos or it was one of these places where a lot of really, really rich people get together and talk about problems, right? Like they have problems. I'm sure they do. Um, and the guy said, this level of income inequality between the haves and the have nots historically has only been solved by war or revolution. And he said, I don't think we want either of those. So we need to figure out how to make this system work better. And I think that whether or not he's historically accurate, I don't know. But I liked the thinking of, look, this is a systemic problem. This is not easy to solve, but we've got a lot of smart people here and a lot of resources. How do we find a way to, yes, make money, but also make the world a better place and take good care of our customers and our employees along the way?
Yeah, I'm a fan of revolution, but I'm not a fan of revolution through destruction. To me,
Right.
that is a red line. I believe in revolution through unification. If you
Mm,
get everybody on the same page and understanding what's trying to happen, the revolution is self, not peer versus peer or employee versus manager. It's the company, the people beating themselves to be the better version and doing it together. And the
yeah.
revolution is not, again, it's not against each other, but it's
Right.
against the old version of, that entity, if you will.
Yeah. It's not the worker versus the manager or the employee versus the executive. It's all of us against the version of ourselves that we were yesterday. And today we want to be better than that.
Yep. Hopefully, in light of the dark situation here, in the end, we don't condone what the individual did. This was a
Hmm.
tragic event. You shouldn't be praised for murdering somebody. On the other hand, it has brought to light a very serious problem that needs to be addressed. And I think if we can find ways in our individual lives to help improve, help make work not suck, then
Hmm.
maybe we can prevent a tragedy like this from happening in the future. So I'd invite feedback and stories from the audience. How can corporate accountability or systematic failures have affected you in the past? Is there something that can be done or a reflection that can be done to drive meaningful change in your workplace? Is there something that you can do from the balance of the employee and the customer standpoint? You are a company's greatest asset. So how can you contribute to being the solution as opposed to being part of the problem?
Yeah. I'd especially love to hear stories of companies tackling systemic problems, right? These big, nasty, complex problems that plague an entire industry. Like, I'd love to hear about somebody trying to tackle one of those and what that journey's been like. That'd be really interesting.
Make work not suck. Our podcast that talks about exactly that. Our process, vision, journey, culture, and results. We present real-world business solutions that make the difference. Our goal is to make work not suck. Hosted by Ryan Hodges, co-host Daniel Steer. Join us each episode and make work not suck.